Since the dawn of time, humanity has pondered what happens at the moment we take our last breath. Is it the definitive end or the beginning of something much greater? The spiritual traditions of the world, from biblical texts to esoteric scriptures, have outlined detailed maps for this transition, revealing that death is not merely a biological event but a gateway to a new reality. Imagine that everything you experience in life, fears, attachments, virtues, and regrets, is merely a prelude to what lies ahead. Are we truly prepared to face the mirror of our own consciousness when the body falls silent? After all, what does death reveal to us about who we are and what we carry within? Death, that enigma accompanying us since the dawn of humanity, has always been more than a simple biological event. For many spiritual traditions, it represents a passage, a transition, a continuation of who we are in another form. But what happens when we die? How have different cultures, religions, and philosophies answered this question over the centuries? In Christianity, death is not the end but the threshold of an eternal journey. The Bible describes that the body returns to dust, but the soul or spirit faces divine judgment. Those who have lived a life of faith and love are welcomed into heaven, a state of full communion with God. For those who have rejected this grace, the destination would be hell, a place of eternal separation. However, for Catholics, there is also purgatory, a state of purification where souls that are not entirely pure but do not deserve condemnation undergo a cleansing process before reaching paradise. This concept does not appear explicitly in the Bible but is supported by ancient traditions and interpretative passages, such as those suggesting prayers for the dead to free them from their sins. But is eternal destiny defined only at death? Some Christian denominations believe that souls sleep until the day of final judgment, when, according to Christ's promise, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken, some to eternal life, and others to shame and everlasting contempt. The idea of a judgment that transcends physical time connects the human experience to something much greater, something we may never fully comprehend in life. In Judaism, death is part of the divine cycle, but for many centuries, the focus was more on the present life than on what happens after death. In ancient texts, the soul goes to Sheol, a shadowy place where the dead await. It is not a place of punishment, but a state of rest and inactivity. Over time, however, Jewish ideas evolved. The Book of Daniel, for example, introduces the notion of resurrection and final judgment. In the Kabbalistic tradition, death is an opportunity for transformation. The soul, after death, may reincarnate to fulfill unfinished missions or return to divine unity. This mystical view of the cycle of death and rebirth raises questions about the purpose of life and what we carry with us when we depart. And in Hinduism, here, death is merely a station in a continuous cycle called samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The soul, or Atman, is eternal, and what happens after death depends on the karma accumulated in life. If a person has cultivated virtues, they may be reborn in a higher condition or even attain moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirths. But if they have lived a life of selfish and negative actions, they may return in challenging circumstances, perhaps as a human in suffering or even in lower forms of life. Sacred Hindu texts, such as the Bhagavad Gita, tell us that the soul changes bodies as someone changes clothes, but the essence of being remains immutable. This perspective challenges the Western idea of identity, urging us to reflect. What are we really beyond the body and the experiences we accumulate? And if death is not the end, could it be a chance to start anew? For Buddhists, who share the concept of samsara with Hinduism, death is an even more detailed transition. According to Tibetan Buddhism, consciousness enters the bardo, an intermediate state between death and rebirth. Here, the soul encounters peaceful and terrifying visions, reflections of its own mind. Recognizing these visions as internal projections can lead to liberation, but succumbing to fear or attachment means returning to the cycle of rebirths. In Islam, death is an essential stage in the soul's journey. When a person dies, their soul enters barzakh, an intermediate state where it awaits the day of judgment. During this time, the righteous are comforted by angels, while sinners face spiritual torment. In the Quran, death is not seen as a punishment but as a return to the divine source. On the day of judgment, souls will be resurrected to be judged by Allah, receiving the reward of paradise, Jannah, or the punishment of hell, Jahannam. Until then, everything we do in life is already writing our destiny. Do we live conscious of this responsibility? Spiritism, based on the teachings of Allan Kardec, offers a detailed and consoling view of death. For spiritists, the soul leaves the physical body but continues to live in a spiritual plane. Here, it reviews its life and reflects on its choices, facing the consequences of its actions, both positive and negative. More evolved spirits may guide the less advanced, and reincarnation is seen as an opportunity for learning and progress. This idea of continuous evolution invites us to ponder: how do our actions today shape not only the present but also eternity? Even in occultism, death is considered a portal, not something definitive. Esoteric traditions, such as theosophy, speak of subtle planes of existence through which the soul transitions. From the astral plane to the mental plane, consciousness continues to evolve, experiencing dimensions that reflect its level of vibration. Ancient Hermetic texts suggest that death is merely a change of state and that the true essence of being never dies, only transforms. Each tradition, in its own way, seeks to answer the same question: what happens when we die? And although the answers vary, from heaven to samsara, from purgatory to rebirth, all lead us to reflect on life. If death is a mirror of what we carry within, what are we creating for the moment we cross that threshold? Imagine yourself at the exact moment when physical life comes to an end. Your body becomes heavy, the sounds of the world fade, and a profound silence settles in. What comes next? According to the ancient teachings of the Bardo Thodol, known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this is the moment when your consciousness begins to separate from the physical body. A moment that, although it may seem terrifying, is described as a unique opportunity, a portal that can lead to final liberation. At the moment of death, a radiant and pure light appears before you. It is called the clear light, not because it is something visible to the eyes, but because it represents the essence of our consciousness, our highest and most divine nature. This light is not something external. It is you. Recognizing it means understanding that there has never been any separation between you and the cosmos, between your individuality and the totality of the universe. This recognition, however, requires profound spiritual preparation, something most people, caught up in the distractions of the material world, rarely achieve. This crucial moment is described as the opportunity to attain nirvana, the complete liberation from all bonds of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It is not a matter of external judgment, but of inner clarity. If you recognize the clear light as your true essence, you may dissolve into it, breaking free from samsara, the endless cycle of suffering. Yet for many, the experience of the clear light is overwhelming. Its immeasurable brilliance, far from being welcoming, can seem threatening to an unprepared mind. Why do so many people fail at this moment? The Bardo Thodol explains that fear, attachment to the physical world, and ignorance of the true nature of reality pull us away from this light. Conditioned by the lives we have led, we instinctively react, clinging to memories, emotions, and everything we know, even when we understand that none of it belongs to us anymore. Instead of surrendering to the light, we retreat, seeking safety in a more familiar state, which leads us to other intermediate realms. However, the moment of death is not merely a reflection of the unknown, it is also a mirror of how we have lived. The way we live directly influences our ability to recognize the clear light. In life, spiritual practices such as meditation, contemplation, and detachment help prepare the mind for this final moment. It is said that Tibetan monks train throughout their lives to recognize the clear light at the moment of death. They know this is the most important portal, the one that defines the soul's journey. If we pause to reflect, we may realize that this experience is not entirely unfamiliar. How many times, even in life, have we experienced small glimpses of this light? Moments of absolute clarity, where we feel connected to something greater, whether during deep meditation, an act of artistic creation, or moments of intense compassion. These moments are like rehearsals for the final encounter with the clear light. But do we recognize their importance? Or do we dismiss them as mere coincidences or fleeting emotions? Moreover, the Bardo Thodol does not limit its description of the clear light to the moment of death. It teaches that we can access it while we are still alive. Every spiritual practice, every moment of introspection, is preparation for this moment. After all, how can we recognize something at the end of life if we never sought it during our existence? This is a call to live consciously, to cultivate a deep relationship with our inner selves. When the clear light appears, it does not come with words or instructions. It simply is. For a prepared mind, this is the moment of complete dissolution, of liberation. For an unprepared mind, it becomes incomprehensible, and fear takes over. At this point, the path diverges. We either achieve liberation or continue our journey through other intermediate states. It is fascinating to realize that this Tibetan vision connects with many other spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, for example, the moment of death is seen as an opportunity to attain moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirths. In Christianity, while there is no clear light described in the same terms, the encounter with God is often associated with a divine light that transcends all human understanding. Could these phenomena described by such different traditions point to a universal truth? Science is also beginning to explore these boundaries. Accounts of near-death experiences often include descriptions of a bright, warm, and welcoming light. Many scientists believe this could be an effect of the brain in its final moments, while others wonder if we are, indeed, glimpsing the continuity of consciousness beyond matter. The clear light, then, is more than a phenomenon described in an ancient text. It is an invitation to live consciously, to prepare our mind and heart for the inevitable. For, at the final moment, we will carry nothing with us except what we have cultivated internally. Are we ready to face this portal? Are we living in a way that will allow us to recognize our essence at the decisive moment? Or are we accumulating fears, attachments, and ignorance that will make this transition more difficult? These questions, though uncomfortable, are essential. For in the end, what truly matters is not only how we die, but how we live. If we fail to recognize the clear light, the journey continues. We enter a new state, where everything we have repressed and carried in our mind manifests. In the next stage, we confront our own reflections in an inner journey that will reveal much about who we truly are. After encountering the clear light, consciousness, unable to recognize it as its own essence, enters the second intermediate state described by the bardo Thodol, the bardo of visions. This is a realm where the unconscious becomes visible, and everything that was repressed, neglected, or ignored during life takes shape. Here, we are confronted by a divine mirror, an inner theater where our actions, fears, and virtues manifest as powerful and inescapable images. At the beginning of this journey, peaceful deities appear. These luminous and compassionate figures represent the highest aspects of our mind: wisdom, love, and serenity. They emerge to remind us of our true nature, offering an opportunity for redemption. Yet recognizing them as parts of ourselves requires self-knowledge and detachment. Without this, even the most beautiful manifestations can seem distant, unattainable, or even frightening. As consciousness moves through this stage, the peaceful deities begin to transform. When unrecognized, they become wrathful deities, terrifying figures that reflect our fears, guilt, and darkest desires. These deities are not external entities. The bardo Thodol clearly states that they are projections of our own mind. In modern terms, they can be thought of as archetypes of the unconscious, an idea explored by Carl Jung. The Swiss psychologist observed that the Tibetan book reveals universal truths about the human psyche, describing gods and demons as representations of the forces dwelling within us all. But what do these visions truly signify? The peaceful deities symbolize our potential to free ourselves from suffering, while the wrathful ones expose the chains binding us to the cycle of samsara. Essentially, each vision is an opportunity for self-understanding. What we encounter in these stages is not external judgment, but a reflection of what we have cultivated in life. It is as if the veil covering our mind is lifted, revealing everything we have accumulated, both light and shadow. Imagine yourself standing before these figures. They shine, dance, and scream. Some are radiant and serene, others have multiple arms, furious faces, and thunderous voices. But none of them are truly out there. They are, in fact, projections of what you carry within. Can you face them with courage? Or do you retreat, overcome by fear? The bardo Thodol teaches that to achieve liberation at this stage, it is necessary to recognize these manifestations as parts of oneself. It is not about defeating the wrathful figures or worshiping the peaceful ones. It is about seeing yourself reflected in each of them, understanding that they are all expressions of the mind. This may seem simple in theory, but in practice, it is a monumental challenge. How often in life are we capable of confronting our fears, anger, or desires without fleeing or hiding? The peaceful and wrathful figures, according to the text, appear for 7 days each, in a cycle that repeats itself. This cycle is not linear time as we know it, but a sequence of experiences that confront consciousness with different aspects of itself. The peaceful deities invite acceptance and fusion with the clear light, while the wrathful ones challenge the consciousness to face its shadows. Ignoring these opportunities for recognition means becoming trapped in cycles of confusion and rebirth. Why do we so often fail at this stage? Fear, a constant in both life and death, is one of the greatest obstacles. When confronted with something we do not understand, our instinct is to withdraw, react, flee. This same mechanism, which protected us from physical threats during life, now prevents us from recognizing that these visions are not enemies but teachers. There is another fascinating aspect of this stage. It is not limited to the experience of death. The bardo of visions is a metaphor for life. Every day, we face reflections of our mind. A difficult relationship may be a reflection of our attachment or insecurity. A moment of clarity and peace may be a manifestation of the peaceful deity within us. Recognizing this in life is a powerful step toward dealing with these experiences in the afterlife. If these descriptions seem symbolic, perhaps they are. This is not merely a literal journey after death, but a spiritual map inviting us to reflect on who we are now. Are we cultivating the elements that would help us face peaceful deities? Or are we feeding the fears and attachments that will transform into wrathful figures? The Bardo Thodol also reminds us that these figures are transitory. They are neither permanent nor absolute. They are like waves in the ocean of the mind, intense but fleeting. The problem is that, in the moment we identify with them, we become trapped. Consciousness begins to seek escapes, trying to flee from terror or cling to pleasure. It is at this point that the cycle of rebirth strengthens, drawing the soul into new destinies. The realm of mirrors, therefore, is not a punishment. It is a call to transformation. It is the moment we have the chance to integrate every part of ourselves, recognizing both light and shadow as aspects of the same essence. For those who succeed, the journey can end here, with complete liberation. For those who do not, the next stage awaits. Now reflect. How often in life do we flee from mirrors that show us who we really are? Will we be ready, at the moment of death, to face everything we carry within? When consciousness passes through the bardo of visions without achieving liberation, it enters the third intermediate stage described in the Bardo Thodol, the bardo of rebirth. This is the moment when the soul, exhausted and confused, begins to be drawn into a new cycle of existence. Here, everything accumulated during life, thoughts, emotions, and actions, becomes the foundation of the next destination. In this stage, consciousness is no longer a passive observer. It transforms into a magnet, attracting the new reality that corresponds to the vibrations created by life's choices. The Bardo Thodol describes this moment as chaotic and intense, with the mind projecting images, memories, and desires that form portals to different rebirths. Each vision, each pull, reflects not only accumulated karma but also the energy dominating consciousness at that moment. Tibetan masters teach that karma, often misunderstood as punishment or reward, is simply the law of cause and effect in action. What you sow, you reap. In the Bardo of rebirth, this is no longer a metaphor but a tangible force shaping the next destiny. But can we influence this process, or are we prisoners of the forces we have created? According to the teachings, there is still a possibility of choice, although it is subtle and difficult to perceive. A consciousness trained to remain stable and clear can resist the pull of the cycle of rebirth. However, for most people, unresolved attachments and desires make this task nearly impossible. Imagine the weight of a life filled with fears, regrets, and ambitions. These forces, now amplified, drag consciousness into the next chapter of existence. The Bardo Thodol describes this moment as a sequence of visions of possible worlds. Some are luminous and inviting, filled with harmonious landscapes and peaceful beings. Others are dark and desolate, reflecting tormented states of mind. These visions are not random. They are direct expressions of the soul's inner state. Just as a peaceful mind creates a welcoming environment in life, it also projects a higher plane of rebirth. Conversely, a mind consumed by anger or attachment may create a portal to a more turbulent existence. Here, once again, the Tibetan text reminds us that destiny is not arbitrary. It is not an external entity deciding where we go. It is we ourselves, in our most essential state, who shape our future. Imagine standing before a blank canvas. Every desire, fear, and unresolved intention paints this canvas, creating the setting for your next life. The question is, how are we painting our future while we are still alive? But there is more to this stage. It is not just about rebirth in the human realm. The Bardo Thodol speaks of 6 realms of existence, each corresponding to different levels of consciousness and karma. There are the realms of the gods, characterized by pleasure and abundance, but also by arrogance and attachment. The human realm, seen as the most balanced for achieving liberation, and the lower realms, such as those of animals, hungry spirits, and hell beings, reflecting denser and darker states of mind. The attraction to these realms is not literal but symbolic. A person dominated by ignorance may be reborn as a being with little self-awareness, while someone trapped in insatiable desire might experience a state of mind akin to that of hungry spirits. Each realm is a direct reflection of the mind's quality and the actions taken in life. However, the Bardo Thodol also emphasizes that these destinies are not eternal. Even a rebirth in realms considered lower is not a perpetual condemnation. Through new learning and experiences, consciousness can always rise. This brings a message of hope. Even within the cycle of rebirths, evolution is possible. For those who wish to escape this wheel of rebirths, the Tibetan teaching is clear. The time for preparation is now. The practice of meditation, cultivating compassion, and detaching from the illusions of the ego are not just spiritual advice. They are practical tools for facing the bardo of rebirth with clarity. A mind that has learned to be still in life is better equipped to withstand the turbulence of this stage, while a restless mind is easily swept away by the currents of karma. It is fascinating to see how this idea resonates with other spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, the concept of samsara also describes a continuous cycle of rebirths governed by karma. In Spiritism, reincarnation is seen as an opportunity for learning and spiritual progress. Even in modern science, the idea that our actions and intentions have long-reaching consequences finds support in psychology and quantum physics, which explore how patterns of energy can perpetuate themselves. What if we thought of life as a rehearsal for the bardo of rebirth? Every choice we make today, every thought we cultivate, is shaping the energy we will carry with us. It is not just about what happens when we die, but about how we are living now. Are we aware of the seeds we are planting? Or are we allowing impulsive fears and desires to govern our journey? In the bardo of rebirth, time becomes fluid, and consciousness navigates a sea of possibilities. Drawn to one portal or another, it eventually settles into a new destination. This is the final moment when rebirth occurs. But for those who have developed full awareness, there is another possibility: to transcend the cycle of rebirth entirely and achieve ultimate freedom. The question that remains is, how can we use this knowledge in our lives? Are we prepared to face the chaos of the bardo of rebirth with clarity? Or will we continue to be swept away by the forces we ourselves have created? With this, the Bardo Thodol concludes its map of death, but the real challenge is lived every day. After all, every moment is a bardo in itself, a state of transition between the past and the future, and an opportunity for transformation. Since the earliest civilizations, death rituals have played a central role in how we face the unknown. They are not merely cultural practices, but bridges between the material and spiritual worlds, an attempt to guide the soul in its passage to the beyond. In the words of Mircea Eliade, historian of religions, rites of passage allow the soul to integrate into the sacred, crossing a transformative threshold. In Tibet, the rituals described in the Bardo Thodol are conducted with meticulous reverence. Monks recite passages from the text beside the body of the deceased for up to 49 days, guiding the soul through the intermediate states of the bardo. Every word, intonation, and gesture serves a purpose: to help the spirit recognize the clear light, overcome the challenges of the visions, and achieve liberation or a higher rebirth. This practice demands not only faith but profound spiritual knowledge on the part of the monks. These rituals are not unique to Tibet. Many cultures around the world have similar practices. In ancient Egypt, for instance, the Book of the Dead was recited during the mummification process, instructing the soul on how to navigate the dangers of the underworld and reach the fields of Yaru, the Egyptian paradise. The mummification itself was a symbolic ritual. The body was preserved as a vessel for the soul in case of its return. But were these rituals merely ancient beliefs, or did they contain deeper knowledge about the stages after death? In Christianity, funeral rites serve a similar purpose. The anointing of the sick, for example, seeks to prepare the soul for its encounter with God, cleansing it of sins and providing spiritual comfort. During funerals, Eucharistic prayers and psalms connect the living and the dead in a single act of faith. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," is more than a verse of comfort. It is a promise of divine care that extends beyond this life. These rituals, although varied, share a common theme, helping the soul detach from the physical world and find a safe path in the unknown. In Japan, Zen Buddhism incorporates Nyoho, a practice emphasizing detachment and serenity. The deceased is wrapped in simplicity, and monks chant mantras to ensure a harmonious transition. The process reflects the belief that dying consciously is an extension of living consciously. In Spiritism, the focus is on providing spiritual assistance to the departed. Prayer is seen as a form of energy that helps the spirit detach from material connections, especially in cases of sudden or traumatic deaths. In mediumistic sessions, it is common for confused spirits to be guided in understanding their new condition, learning to accept their transition. This raises an inevitable question. Does the quality of our detachment depend not only on external rituals but also on what we cultivate in life? Furthermore, rituals are not only for the dead, they also comfort the living. In Mexico, the Dia de los Muertos celebrates the memory of the deceased, transforming mourning into connection and celebration. Colorful altars, adorned with offerings and photographs, invite souls to visit their loved ones. The idea that the dead are not truly lost but present in another form is an antidote to fear and loneliness. Modern psychology also recognizes the power of rituals. Studies show that participating in funeral ceremonies helps process loss, providing a space to express emotions and seek meaning. But are these rituals merely psychological mechanisms? Or do they carry spiritual wisdom that transcends scientific explanations? The role of rituals also extends to the physical environment. In Tibet, it is believed that the place of death and the elements surrounding it influence the soul's journey. This is why death is accompanied by chants, incense, and mandalas, creating an energetic field conducive to the transition. In Hinduism, cremation along the banks of the Ganges River is considered a form of purification, releasing the spirit to reach higher realms. Through prayers, mantras, chants, or elaborate ceremonies, rituals remind us that death is not a disconnection but a transition. Each practice is an invitation to introspection, for both the living and the dead. It is as if, on the threshold between two worlds, rituals are threads weaving together the material and the immaterial. What about modern practices? Many of us in secularized societies have abandoned traditional rituals, replacing them with more symbolic ceremonies or simply ignoring the spiritual dimension of death. But does this disconnection leave us more lost when confronted with the inevitable? Throughout history, ritualistic practices have evolved, but their purpose remains the same: to connect, transform, and prepare. The question that lingers is, are we living in a way that honors our own transition? Or are we neglecting the opportunity to prepare spiritually for what comes next? These rituals, ancient or modern, do not promise to avoid death but teach us to face it with courage, dignity, and perhaps even gratitude. They remind us that, even in the face of the unknown, we are not alone. For the alchemists, death was never the end but the starting point for the most significant transformation. Alchemy, often reduced to the literal quest of turning lead into gold, is in truth a profound metaphor for the transmutation of the soul. To die in order to be reborn is an alchemical maxim that has endured through the centuries, connecting with diverse spiritual traditions and suggesting that death is not a loss but an opportunity for evolution. The alchemical principle of solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine, encapsulates the idea that spiritual transformation requires the dissolution of old structures, attachments, and ego illusions. This process is symbolically associated with death. In Hermetic texts such as the Corpus Hermeticum, we find the notion that the soul, upon leaving the body, is freed from material constraints and returns to the divine. But this return is not automatic. It depends on the state of the soul throughout its earthly journey. Death, then, is seen as a necessary stage in the great laboratory of existence. For medieval alchemists, each phase of the alchemical process reflected an aspect of spiritual death and rebirth. Calcination, for instance, symbolized the burning away of ego impurities, while coagulation represented the integration of the purified spirit. This cycle, which occurs during life, also mirrors the literal moment of death, when consciousness confronts the reality of what it has cultivated. In ancient Egypt, spiritual alchemy was deeply intertwined with beliefs about death. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is a detailed manual on how the soul can navigate the perils of the underworld and reach the fields of Yaru, the eternal paradise. In this process, the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth and balance. If the heart was light, the spirit was ready to ascend. This idea perfectly illustrates Solve et Coagula. The soul must release its burdens before achieving fullness. But how do these lessons apply to life? Can we experience these symbolic deaths while still alive? Spiritual alchemy teaches that we can. Moments of crisis, loss, and personal transformation are small deaths that prepare us for the final one. When we lose something we value, face our deepest fears, or abandon harmful patterns, we are living an alchemical process. Can we embrace these experiences as opportunities for growth, or do we see them only as suffering? The connection between death and transformation is not limited to Western alchemy. In Tibetan Buddhism, death marks the beginning of a process of dissolving the elements that compose physical and mental existence. During the bardo, the soul undergoes a cycle of dissolution and recreation, a process that echoes the alchemical principle. The clear light, described as the ultimate essence, can only be recognized by those who have completely dissolved their attachments. In Hinduism, we encounter the concept of Shiva, the destroyer and regenerator. Shiva symbolizes the force necessary to destroy the old and make way for the new. Shiva's dance, called the Tandava, is a cosmic representation of the cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. For alchemists, destruction is the prelude to creation. In life, do we have the courage to let go of what limits us in order to be reborn stronger? Modern psychology also explores the idea of symbolic death. Carl Jung, influenced by alchemy, described the process of individuation as a series of psychological deaths and rebirths. For Jung, integrating the shadow, those parts of ourselves we repress or deny, is essential to achieving wholeness. This integration, requiring us to confront fears and accept vulnerabilities, is a death of the ego as we know it. In everyday life, the alchemy of death manifests in ways we do not always recognize. When we undergo drastic changes, the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, transitioning to a new phase of life, we are living small cycles of death and rebirth. The challenge is to see these transformations not as endings but as opportunities for inner transmutation. Even nature teaches us about the alchemy of death. The cycle of the seasons, where winter symbolizes death and spring rebirth, reflects the universal order. The caterpillar, in transforming into a butterfly, undergoes a symbolic death within its cocoon before emerging into a new state of being. Can we view death in our lives the same way, not as an end but as a portal to something greater? The alchemy of death also invites us to reflect on the legacy we leave behind. Just as lead is transmuted into gold, our actions can be transformed into lasting impact. What are we cultivating in life? What memories, teachings, or energies do we leave behind? True immortality, the alchemists teach, lies not in the physical body but in what we transform and pass on. For many, death is a terrifying mystery. But what if we saw it as a teacher, an ally in the process of spiritual growth? Alchemy teaches us that transformation happens only when we accept the process of dissolution. We cannot be reborn without first dying, whether symbolically in life or at the final moment. The lingering question is, are we living in a way that prepares us for these inevitable transformations? Or do we resist the flow of life, accumulating fears and attachments that will make the passage more difficult? Perhaps the greatest lesson of alchemy is this: death is not the opposite of life, but an essential part of it. Death, despite its mystery, has always held a transformative power for those who remain. Regardless of culture or belief, the passing of someone forces us to confront impermanence, reflect on the purpose of existence, and consider what we leave behind as a legacy. If death marks the end of physical experience, what remains of us? Our actions, our words, our teachings, these are the imprints that transcend us. In Buddhism, there is a principle that states, if you want to know what your next life will be like, observe how you live this one. This idea resonates with the concept of karma but can also be interpreted more practically. The quality of the life we live leaves traces, shaping not only the soul's future but also its impact on the world around us. Are we aware of the spiritual, emotional, or moral legacy we are building. The legacy of death is often reflected in how we handle loss. In Japan, the Mexican Dia de los Muertos finds its counterpart in the Japanese Buddhist festival of Obon, where the souls of ancestors are honored and remembered. This practice is not only a comfort for the living, but also a celebration of continuity across generations. It is a way of saying that, even in physical absence, those who have passed live on in our actions and memories. Christian spirituality offers another perspective on legacy. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus emphasizes, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." This purity, lived out, becomes an example for those left behind, a model of faith and compassion. Saints and martyrs are remembered not only for their words, but for the transformative impact of their actions on the world. Even for those who do not share the Christian faith, this idea raises an essential question. How do our choices echo beyond us? Spiritism deepens this reflection. For Spiritists, reincarnation is an opportunity for continuous learning, and each life represents a chapter in the soul's progress. However, it is not just about learning, it is also about contributing. Allan Kardec emphasized that the good we do in life is the only wealth we carry with us, but it is also the wealth we leave for the world. How are we using our present life to create something that benefits others? Even in psychology, the concept of legacy is explored. Erik Erikson, in his Stages of Human Development, points out that in maturity, we seek to leave something for the next generation, whether through creation, teaching, or care. This search is not merely altruistic. It gives life meaning and helps us face death with serenity. Nature, too, teaches us about legacies. A tree that falls in a forest does not disappear. Its body decomposes, enriches the soil, and allows new life to grow. Similarly, human death, when lived consciously, can be a catalyst for transformation among the living. When we lose someone we love, we are compelled to rethink our priorities, value the present, and seek meaning in our actions. But what about the inner legacy? Spirituality does not only ask us to leave external marks on the world, but also to cultivate peace and wisdom within ourselves. In Buddhism, there is frequent talk of the garden of the mind, an inner space we must tend so that we can bring serenity and compassion wherever we go. What are we planting in our inner garden? Another dimension of legacy lies in the choices we make when facing death. The way we confront the final transition can serve as an example for others. Many spiritual traditions describe great masters who faced death with dignity, acceptance, and even joy. Their attitude was not one of denial, but of total surrender to the flow of life. Will we be able to offer this kind of inspiration in our final moments? Stoic philosophy reminds us that death is inevitable and that by accepting it, we free ourselves from many fears. Seneca wrote, "It is only when we learn to die that we truly begin to live." This acceptance, paradoxically, makes us more present and aware of what we leave behind. Finally, there is the intangible legacy, the values and energies we transmit. A smile, a gesture of kindness, a word of encouragement may seem small, but they are like seeds that bloom in other hearts. The impact of our actions is often invisible in the moment, but their reverberation can last for generations. Are we living in a way that plants seeds that will bloom in beauty and goodness? In the end, death teaches us that it is not how much we accumulate or achieve that matters, but how much we touch the lives around us. Our legacy is not in material possessions, but in the memories we create, the values we uphold, and the love we offer. How do we want to be remembered? This question may seem somber, but it is an invitation to reflection. Death is not merely an end. It is a constant reminder that every moment is precious and that we have the opportunity to create something meaningful every day. If life is a book, death is the final chapter, but the impact of the story remains. What are we writing on our pages? The visions of different spiritual traditions show us that death is not an incomprehensible mystery, but a mirror of what we cultivate during life. From recognizing the clear light to choosing rebirth, we are challenged to live with awareness and purpose, knowing that every thought and action shapes not only our present but also our eternal future. If you're interested in exploring more about spirituality, I've selected some videos filled with profound knowledge and fascinating discoveries just for you. Click on one of them to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay connected on this path. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step toward transforming your reality.